The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It's Thursday, July 18th, 2019. I'm Michael Brooks on a Michael Thursday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Ben Burgis, author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. Can the Democratic debates get better from the perspective of having public debates that actually facilitate better discussion? We'll talk about that, how the lies and propaganda against Medicare for all are sold, the case for why Sanders truly represents something distinct, new, different, and significantly better. Also, the Brazil coup and logical fallacies. A lot to do with Ben Burgis. That better? Also on today's program, Donald Trump. His base wants a race war. He'll give it to them, rhetorically. Will the Democrats fight back? Well, of course, a lot of them won't, but we will. We will stand with Elon. And will most normal Americans see what these people are doing and side against bigotry? The House holds William Barr and Wilbur Ross in criminal contempt. Ilhan Omar with the most... She's just incredible. She introduces a resolution affirming the right of people to participate in a boycott.
Not even specifically about BDS.
Not even specifically about BDS against Israel, just in general, because the anti-BDS bills are unconstitutional. Rand Paul, he's terrible, but in this totally unnecessary crisis created by Trump with Iran, he might be the administration's envoy to Iran. And so, with one hand give, the other hand take away, Rand Paul reminding everybody he's a sociopath by holding up the 9/11 compensation fund single-handedly. Thousands are protesting right now in Puerto Rico against a massive disclosure of corruption and much else against the Puerto Rican governor and his cabinet. Amazon's facing a target crackdown from the European Union. Glenn Greenwald and The Intercept are still disclosing new corruption revelations against Sergio Moro and the Lava Jato team that made Lula da Silva a political prisoner. And the Bolsonaro government is apparently deeply targeting Glenn Greenwald. Solidarity with him. And Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar is quite busy. Have asked the Department of Labor to investigate Amazon warehouses. And young people move forward in a federal suit against the federal government on climate change, how it's risked their futures, and the U.S. government has known that it would be a problem going back to the 1960s. All that and much, much more on today's Majority Report. I do want to say just programmatically, we had a great guest. Ben Burgis is an amazing guest. Obviously, he's a regular on TMBS. So, I mean, you know, sometimes there's the same guests. They go back and forth in between both shows, obviously. But especially, I've had Ben on this show to talk about his great book. But we had a guest. She was going to talk about why Biden care is a disaster, why we need Medicare for all. But there was a travel a significant travel problem. So that will be rebooked. But I'm stoked to speak to Ben Burgis. And thanks for responding to my text, Ben. A little bit of some behind-the-scenes action here, folks. We need to get to this. There is a huge amount of inbuilt cynicism about Donald Trump, about his racism, about his bigotry. The 3 lines here of response are actually really basic to just the racism in and of itself. There's a group of people that crave it and want it and affirm it. That's his base. That's the Republican Party. There is a continuum of people that spans, they might sound rhetorically different at times, but there's a lot of quote-unquote never Trump Republicans. There's Chuck Todd types. There's Democratic leaders like Pelosi and so on who might, moralistically condemn or hector or, strongly wag their finger at it, but do nothing of substance or seriousness to actually combat it strategically. And then there's those of us, and right now, obviously the lead is these 4 leaders in Congress. Bernie Sanders has obviously also been incredibly unequivocal about this. And I say Bernie Sanders because he's talking specifically about these 4 leaders. I mean, that's a really distinguishing thing that you can find. All of the Democratic candidates and so on will put out statements against xenophobia and against hate and so on, but this has a face. This has a specific target list. It's Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ayanna Pressley, and most significantly and most drastically and most grotesquely, Ilhan Omar. This is Bernie Sanders yesterday. It starts exactly with the simplest point. Hashtag I stand with Ilhan, and I'm proud to work with her in Congress. Trump is stoking the most despicable and disturbing currents in our society, and that very hatred and racism fuels him. We must fight together to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country. Now, again, and it's not just because I support Sanders. If other candidates were leading with the hashtag, or congressional leaders for that matter, I would give them the same props. But it just needs to be very clear that that is how we start. We don't start with some broad, big picture, and certainly none of the "this isn't who we are" Joe Biden pablum. We go with this is one of America's most important young leaders, someone who's incidentally incredibly physically courageous. Elizabeth Warren, this is really important. 30 minutes ago. And I was saying this because as of last night, Elizabeth Warren had not done this, but she did it. So now I'm very happy to give her props right now. It is Elizabeth Warren. Hashtag I stand with Hashtag I stand with Ilhan against attacks from this racist president, and we should all remember this definition of patriotism. And then she quote tweets an excellent video from Now This by an excellent Congresswoman and leader Ilhan Omar from Now This. But it's maybe we could play that later. But the point is great. So Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, of the candidates I'm aware of now, have been the ones that have used the hashtag and have spoken directly and clearly. Mm-hmm.
I'll just say, and earlier in the week before Trump really went in on the Ilhan stuff, when the squad stuff was going on, Cory Booker also said something about the 4, and it's amazing what running for president can do to a Democrat these days.
It's pretty amazing because let us never forget that the Democratic leadership, the failed, sclerotic, utterly unfit for purpose Democratic leadership, people like Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries, have spent more time, and the just unbelievably odious and grotesque Rahm Emanuel manages to pop up in this as well. I guess he's not House leadership, obviously, but they've spent more time backbiting, briefing against, and trying to damage these 4 leaders than actually even taking on Trump, let alone seriously pushing a progressive agenda. So And now it's circled against Ilan. It's circled against Ilan both because, look, incredibly easy source of extreme bigotry and racism. She's a Somali refugee. She's a Muslim. She wears a headscarf. I mean, these things are really obvious. And I think it's also because, and I don't mean this, all four of these leaders are incredibly important and courageous, and they all bring different distinct things to the table. I think we actually saw yesterday, or the day before, the way Ayanna Pressley was able to synthesize her attack on Trump with a very clear, indirect articulation of how Nancy Pelosi was playing and what she saw and how she was going to follow up on it. Rashida Tlaib has always been someone I've been a huge fan of and has a grassroots background and is DSA and has been very clear, partially obviously as a result of her, heritage as a Palestinian, about, being clear about the occupation and the abuses of the Palestinian people. And AOC obviously has an extraordinary amount of star power and has used her platform in a number of incredibly important ways on climate, on credit cards, on the Green New Deal. And to me, frankly, most significantly, and all of them now kind of cohering most significantly right now, on the concentration camps and the issues of this Gestapo tactics at the border. But Ilhan Omar, in addition to her fearlessness on calling out the coup-mongering of this administration in Venezuela, with the complicity and the support of Democratic leaders like Nancy Pelosi and Engel and so on, she does not flinch. She does not back down. And best believe that this woman's life is endangered. And this is, this is the clown fascist in chief. This is the idiot. He knows what he's doing. And, generic rejection of it isn't going to work. Here he is in North Carolina yesterday,
saying some people did something. I don't think so. Some people did something. Yeah, some people did something. All right. She pleaded for compassion for
She meant some people did something that not every single Muslim should have to answer for.
That was precisely the point. Exactly. He's referring to a statement that Ilhan Omar made in the context of talking about Muslim civil liberties and civil rights after 9/11. And her point was precisely that, yes, a specific terrorist group committed a specific terrorist atrocity. And then the policies that flowed out of that, in terms of the invasion of civil liberties, not to mention the millions of lives taken overseas, has spilled out into many of the world's Muslims who had nothing to do with that event. It's quite simple, but obviously Donald Trump's going to twist it.
ISIS recruits attempting to join the terrorist organization. She was looking for compassion. Omar laughed that Americans speak of Al-Qaeda in a menacing tone and remarked that you don't say America with this intensity. You say Al-Qaeda makes you proud. Al-Qaeda makes you proud. You don't speak that way about America.
Pause it. If I understand what he's referring to, I think this was actually her point of saying your pride and your energy should be in your country, not a ragtag terrorist group. And I'm going to do red, white, and blue and agree with her on that. I think you should have a lot more intensity and excitement about the potential and possibility of a complicated, flawed, but also very promising place that Ilhan Omar has done more in her life and even just her time here than Donald Trump. I mean, not only than Donald Trump has ever had. Donald Trump is doing everything he can to harm and undermine this country and the planet, obviously. So I agree with her. I think it would be much better if you want to build an identity in relationship to your country to have a positive and proactive one, and one that isn't neurotically obsessed with a disgusting terrorist organization that almost certainly none of the idiots in this audience will ever have to deal with. And by the way, Ilhan Omar, groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, nobody do they hate more than an Ilhan Omar. In fact, if you look at their strategy documents, there's a really, I think it's called The Management of Savagery, which is a strategy document that I think it was emerged from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, but it's been a blueprint for ISIS. A big part, and Osama bin Laden as well, a huge part of their game plan has been empowering George W. Bush's, Donald Trump's, the European far right. That is precisely the tactics, along with lone wolf terrorist actions, that they see as most effective for growing their toxic ideology and enhancing their influence. So if anything, Donald Trump is an incredible benefit to these people.
And we also have this picture of a speech a couple days earlier where Trump was spelling Al-Qaeda Al-Qaida. So he's clearly an expert on who.
Yeah, that does not sound to me like he takes Al-Qaida as seriously as he needs to. Fucking buffoon. All right, let's finish this.
And at a press conference just this week, when asked whether she supported Al-Qaeda, that's our enemy. That's our enemy. They are a very serious problem that we take care of, but they always seem to come along somewhere. She refused to answer. She didn't want to give an answer to that question. Omar blamed
because she shouldn't have to.
The United States for the crisis in Venezuela. I mean, think of that one. And she looks down with contempt on the hard-working Americans, saying that ignorance is pervasive in many parts of this country.
Just one other thing to say here. I mean, one's the obvious point that somebody who's the co-sponsor of Medicare for All, student debt cancellation, wants to investigate Amazon warehouses and so on, obviously is doing infinitely more for working people of every single background in this country than Donald Trump, who's the enemy of the working class, white, brown, black, and everywhere. But this is the other really bizarre dual impulse of American white supremacy and racism, because there's even though Trump, obviously is, kind of a, sort of an idiot and an oaf in some ways, despite his, instincts for demagoguery, his sort of backroom chat is, I want high IQ people. And the sort of, the pseudoscience, the smart person test, the Charles Murray, the genteel pseudoscientific racism, the I want people from Norway stuff. But then on the flip side, there's this, you're an uneducated, you're probably not particularly well read and so on. And again, it's very interesting because those are frankly the quality. Judging people by where they went to school, judging people by their cultural currency, what they, how they present themselves, and certainly judging people by some dumb test metric, trash, reject it, period. But obviously we can make estimations about people's intellectual curiosity, what they choose to investigate and inquire about their own. I mean, just a handy example, but the gentleman who called in last week, he's a farmer. It's like, yeah, I farm and I like to watch and learn things. That has nothing to do with any kind of like nonsense social capital game, which is what repulses a lot of people about what is called like the coastal elites, right? Because it's not about genuine intellectual inquiry. It's about where you went to college and all this crap, which is in fact crap.
And how you can purvey that into a massive income.
And how you can exactly. But this is speaking to an attitude of, I don't want to know. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to read books. I don't want to enlarge my scope of understanding the world, which anybody can do. And most of those elites, by the way, do not have an enlarged scope of the world at all. They just have a narrow elite one. But what he's speaking to, though, is that duality, where on one hand, we're white, we're racist, we dismiss other people. And then on the other hand, look at Elon, like, She's global. She's sophisticated. She's clearly hyper articulate. She's well read. She's got an intelligence. She has a savvy to her. Well, to hell with that. She looks down on you. And that's the duality. And there's no contradiction in these people's minds because both is feeding on the historical continuity of the mythology of essentialization and race and white identity politics, but it's also just filling enormous psychological and emotional vacuums in these people, which need to be filled by either inflation or deflation because of their identity. But anyways, finish it.
And obviously and importantly, Omar has a history of launching vicious anti-Semitic screeds.
Lies.
Lie.
This is what fascism sounds like.
And she talked about the evil Israel, and it's all about the Benjamins. Not a good thing to say. So that's Omar. That's Omar. And by the way, many other things. All you have to do is press the right button on your beautiful screen.
So, yeah, they chanted, send her back, send her back. Been saying for a while now. Obviously, Trump's 2016 campaign was dishonest, racist, xenophobic, misogynist, everything. And then there was a scam and hustle about protecting people's economic interests. But because he's a Republican, he governs against the 99% economic interest. So all he has left is this. And not the people. I absolutely think that there was a small but statistically significant percentage of people who voted for Trump because of those economic things. They're gone. You actually can measure that in the midterms, particularly in the Midwest. But we got to be real that a significant part of the Republican base, this is what they want. And
this is also what the system is has been sent up for centuries to deliver.
Precisely. And it is disgusting. And it is, it's every adjective expressing moral condemnation you have is all appropriate for that. And as Mehdi Hassan tweeted today, they're trying to get her killed. We don't need to flinch about what this collective action is. And the only response to it is there are no sidelines. You are 100% with Ilhan Omar, period. Obviously, that doesn't mean you can have political debates, you can disagree, whatever, that's fine. But the fundamental thing that this is a leader, this is a congressperson, this is someone of an immense courage and integrity that we support 100%. We fight against the lies and smears about her. You're going to be hearing a lot more about a lot of crackpot theories that, just like birtherism began in the worst of the right-wing swamps, they're going to get spread through those networks. They're going to correlate with the president. Obviously, you have a troll as president. There's no difference between him and anybody spreading a lie on social media. And then the broader struggle here is getting and acquiring power and using that power to materially defeat the conditions of this politics, and then also understanding that, in fact, your role as a politician is actually also a cultural one. And that's why there can be absolutely zero ambiguity about ruthlessly fighting back against this stuff, every shape and form. And there is no room for ambiguity right now in clear anti-racism and in the very specific character of support for these four leaders as they're terrorized. And Ilhan Omar has always been, precisely because she has been willing to criticize Israel, precisely because there are a few comments, one, from 2012, which you can, take out of context or distort. And also precisely because she's actually shown her own willingness to evolve and improve, which, Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump sure as hell don't show.
Or Ben Shapiro, for that matter.
Oh, Ben Shapiro is another one. Don't let, Ben Shapiro, we got to go in a second, but Ben Shapiro, watch him very closely right now, because his move right now is, oh, well, that's the president can't say that. She's a vicious anti-Semite. So he's going to continue to lie and smear about her and set the context for hate while he tries to pivot his brand against the actual incitement against him.
Yeah, leave a paper trail.
He's doing the same thing in reality, whether he knows it or not. That's what it is. And there's a reason why, whatever his intentions are, there's a reason why he's up there on those grids when some terrorist attacks a mosque. So let's be clear about this and have her back. We're going to take a brief break. We'll be right back with Ben Burgis. Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is Ben Burgis. He's author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, available now. Get it immediately. You can also go to Ben's Patreon page and get essays and recordings and all sorts of other content from Ben. He's also the regular on the Debunk on TMBS as well. Ben, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Ben, just more broadly, I mean, we got some Democratic debates coming up at the end of the month. The lineups were released yesterday. It looks like I don't actually know. They've tried to sort of mix things up a little bit more, so you don't have the same kind of stack effect that you had a couple of weeks ago, where you had all of the main contenders with the exception of Elizabeth Warren on one stage, and then Warren on stage with the sort of more, generally kind of more marginal candidates. Debates are bad, and especially Democratic debates, because they don't have the sort of like insane carnival grotesque aspect of Republican debates, which can be just sort of like late Roman crumbling empire entertainment. But they're still entertainment. They still actually don't have really all that much substance. What, as a logic professor, what could actually facilitate those things being more substantive, more worthwhile?
Yeah. So our mutual friend David Feldman always says that you should it should be more like a Senate hearing where the moderators are like inquisitors, and I've never been quite sure what to think about that, because of course, that just gives more power to the sort of narratives that are being pushed by the big corporate media venues that are hosting these things. But I will say that the way that moderators ask follow-up questions is really unhelpful in the format that we've got now, right? Because it's just really superficial. That right now, it's you'll get follow-up questions like. Bernie Sanders says Rachel Maddow was misrepresenting him on gun control, which she actually was, by the way. And he'll and she'll follow up saying, no, that's a quote, right? So you have this kind of he said, she said about trivia, and there'll be a little bit of fact checking, but you don't really get meaningful follow up questions about the content of what they're saying. And so I think that if you're going to have a debate, and by the way, another thing that you could do would be to really dramatically reduce the number of people on stage. It's just not helpful to have 12 people up there. And I feel a little weird and anti-democratic about saying that, but it really does.
I was going to say there's going to be a certain contingent that's going to be like, he says he's a socialist.
Yeah. No. I mean, if you got rid of the total cranks advocating UBI and stuff like that, just had the big candidates up there.
Oh well,
that would be that would
turn off your mentions.
That would be very helpful. But no, seriously, because you have so many people up there, it's very hard to, everything's kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. And it would be very helpful if you probably need a different kind of moderator for that, because the sort of media hacks that you have doing this, I don't think would necessarily be very good at this, for the most part, with some exceptions. Mm-hmm. But if you had moderators who would say, hold on, what you just said, I'm not, that doesn't really make sense, right? Are you saying this or are you saying this? What about this? That would be much more helpful than just kind of trying to pin people down into things they can do sound bites about.
Is it also the fact that, and some of this goes back to Tim Russert, who's actually been passed away for a while now, but his methodology on Meet the Press was all about, it was like, it doesn't matter what the merit or substance of anything is. All that matters is the contradiction. So, in other words, actually a good example of this would be John McCain. So, when George W. Bush was first elected, and I do think because John McCain was pretty much like a purely ego-driven politician, he was super pissed still because, and absolutely, George W. Bush's campaign did run an incredibly dirty and, in fact, totally racist campaign in South Carolina against him. And he both was had a national brand that had built up, and especially in that, in 2000, still very post-ideological space. So, the terrain was sort of like, third-way Democrat, compassionate conservative. So he got a huge amount of love from the so-called liberal media. And, he had a grievance and a brand. And so in the beginning of the Bush administration, you could read, there was a couple years there where he voted against the Bush era tax cuts. And he actually said specifically at the time it was because they favored the wealthy. They weren't going to be good for, middle class and working people. He voted against Bush on some environmental initiatives and other things. I mean, obviously not on war. John McCain was totally never willing to compromise. He could set aside a personal grievance when it came to an imperial adventure that would kill millions of people, obviously. So I don't want to deprive the man of that. But that being said,
sure,
Tim Russert...
Probably the only reason that we haven't invaded Iran yet is that Trump realizes that, it's John McCain's dying wish.
Right, exactly. That is actually super deep. That's actually probably exactly why we haven't debated Iran yet. That's the best theory I've heard. So, but then, when McCain remade himself after 2004 back into a conventional hard right conservative to run for president in 2008 and, embraced all of, trickle down economics and everything. So the Russert method and the method of even the moderators of the Democratic debate wouldn't be like, why have you changed this policy set? And, are your interests different now? And now are you actually just into rewarding wealthy people and increasing inequality? Have you, moved back to the right philosophically? It would just be, well, you were here then, and now you're here now. That's a contradiction, and that's it. Gotcha.
Yes. No, exactly. That's because that makes for a really cheap, really easy soundbite, to say, hey, here's what, you can play what he said back then, you can play what he said now, it's superficially embarrassing. And look, if somebody's saying something interesting and you think you can catch them in an inconsistency, that might actually go somewhere. But, when it comes to stuff like this, it's a total diversion from actually exploring the substance of it. And, how much better would it have been if people had been interviewing John McCain in 2008 and they had been really challenging him on the merits of invading Iraq and staying there for 100 years, which he once, infamously said that he'd be willing to do. Like actually digging into that and how he's, continued to stand by it after everything that had happened, that would have been a public service. Just sort of catching him on the fact that he changed his mind and seeing if he has a smooth explanation of that is just theater, and it's not even really very good theater.
So that brings me, then what is the relationship between rhetoric and logic?
Yeah, so logic is about giving good reasons for beliefs that, I want you to agree with me, I'm going to give you a reason to agree with me, or I'm even thinking about, even if there's not another person involved, I'm just thinking about what the correct position is, and I'm like weighing different reasons for thinking one thing versus thinking another thing, what the evidence is. Whereas rhetoric is about how you package that. And when I say that, the point is not at all to dump on rhetoric. I think rhetoric is really important. And oftentimes there are lots of people on the left I wish paid more attention to it. But logic is about is about the substance of your arguments. Rhetoric is about how you present your arguments, and they're both important. But I think that oftentimes the lane that I'm interested in is mostly about actually getting the arguments right. But of course, you also want to package them in the most effective, compelling way possible if you're interested in political outcomes, because otherwise what's the point, right? You want to convince as many people as possible. So you want to put it in the package rhetorically that is going to convince as many people as possible. But if you just got rhetoric and there's no good underlying argument, then it's just kind of pointless. Then it's a box with some really nice wrapping paper on it, but nothing inside.
Has anybody done more to confuse logic with rhetoric than Ben Shapiro?
Probably not. I think we discussed when I was on the show the first time his book 11 Rules for Arguing with leftists and Destroying Them, which God, I just love that so much, right? You just get this image for that title of some Ben Shapiro arguing with some big leftist, Zizek or Chomsky or somebody, and
right.
That guy just having to be carried out as stretcher because Shapiro just destroyed him. But then, if you read that book, 9 of the 11 rules are just about how to frame the argument. Right. Make sure that people are talking about this and not this, and that you're walking into the fire as far as what they're giving you, and that you don't let them change the subject to accusing you of being a racist, which is a problem apparently he has a lot for some reason.
Yeah, I wonder why. Right.
Yeah, right. But it's one of maybe I think 1.5 of the rules actually have anything to do with logic, right? Even though this is the guy the New York Times called the destroyer of weak arguments. There's one rule that's about spot inconsistencies in the other person's position, and all the examples he has are ridiculously superficial, stuff on the level of they say they care about people dying, but then they support abortion, just ridiculous stuff like that. So right. there's a drop of in the ocean of rhetorical framing. There's a little eyedropper drop of attempt to actually engage with the substance of arguments. And
yeah, right. And then that leads to the even if I grant you global warming and the oceans start to flood people's homes, you could just sell them. Right. Ben Shapiro logic par excellence. If your beachfront property is flooded because of global warming, just flip it on the market.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, as ridiculous as he is, he's loud, he's fast, he's confident, which means that most people probably, I hope some of them had this thought immediately, but probably a lot of the people who listen to him say that didn't think until much later, oh, wait a second, hold on, Ben, you're selling it to who?
Right. You had some real frustration specifically in the debates with misframes and lies about Medicare for all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of this has to do, and it's actually kind of interesting to see the evolution of this, because in 2016, the big objection that Hillary made to Medicare for all was that it would involve raising taxes, and you still got a little bit of that this time, right? Like one of the questions that Bernie was given in the first debate was about getting him to admit, as if he's ever denied it, that taxes would be raised to pay for it. And of course, he made the obvious point that sure, you're going to raise taxes, but the overall cost for a middle-income family of their current tax burden plus private insurance premium is going to be less than the cost of the raised taxes, which is all that should matter. But that's not the main line of attack this time around. It seems like this time the line of scrimmage has shifted to all this stuff about, well, what about people who like their health insurance? You're taking away health insurance from people who like it. You know, what about all the people who love it, who say, you know, we've always been a Blue Cross Blue Shield family. It would break my heart.
I have to say, Ben, I'm long supported Medicare for all, mostly because I've gone years without having health insurance, and also because of my values. But damn, Oscar as a company has done so much to evoke brand loyalty in me. It's gotten a lot harder.
I know.
I mean, the way that they make it slightly less financially calamitous for basic coverage, it just is like, God, what would happen to them?
I know, right? Exactly.
Right.
So he said, you know, okay, why are you taking away, you know, health? You know, if people like their health insurance, then they should be able to keep it. You know, why not just have, you know, Medicare for all who want it?
Right.
You know, just have something that is in the exchanges, which everybody hates because normal human beings hate having to fill out forms and compare the fine print on different plans. But, you know, have an option on the exchanges that you label Medicare for all, and that you're going to charge some kind of premium for, but it'll be run by the government. You know, that's good enough, right? What's wrong with that? And of course, one thing that's wrong with that is that people like one of the great advantages of socialized systems for healthcare, whether it's, you know, Medicare for all like Canada or a fully socialized system like the UK, is that you don't have to think about it, right? That you never have to think or talk about healthcare with anybody but a doctor. And this is adding a hassle. And of course, people are still going to be without healthcare during transition, you know, periods. Like if you have employer-based health insurance, and then you lose it, and you have to go on the exchange and switch to this Medicare for all branded insurance program, then there's still that transitional period. And of course, people don't want to, you know, I mean, I have not lately, fortunately, but I've been on Medicaid, and, you know, and a lot of doctors don't take that, right? There's no guarantee that they would take this. And most importantly, the whole framing of this is just based on a massive equivocation about the idea of people liking their health insurance, you know, what that really means, that somebody would like their health insurance. And by the way, if you look at the polls about this, they never use the word like. They never say, do you like your health insurance? They say, are you satisfied with your health insurance? Mm-hmm. Which is a very different thing. Satisfied means like, hey, you figure given the options, you know, you could be doing a whole lot worse. You're not going to complain. But to the extent that any human being might actually say you like your health insurance, well, I don't know what it would even really mean to say that you like this financial institution middleman. You know, it's certainly not, you know, some emotional attachment to it. So realistically, what that means is, well, you think that it's the cheapest option that's available to you. And of course, Medicare for all, you know, what you'd be paying in taxes, you know, would be, since it's a much more efficient way to do things, would be much less than what you're paying for, you know, insurance premiums. Or it means you like your doctor and you're afraid, of course, as we all are, that if you lose your health insurance, especially if you have regular prescriptions to refill, then the doctor that you have is going to be out of plan for your new insurance. You're going to have to wait for a really long time for your first appointment with whatever new doctor you find, and then there's going to be another appointment for the prescription, and it's a huge hassle. You like your doctor, you want to keep your doctor, but of course, once you realize that that's what liking your health insurance means, that's actually an argument for Medicare for All, right. Because under Medicare for All, the only way to go out of plan is to leave the country.
Right. Well, and theoretically, you could actually, you would still have some form of, of course, if you're traveling a lot of other, I remember even going to, there was a period of time where I was spending time in Trinidad and Tobago, and I remember it was really funny of just like, I was probably pretty irresponsible about this stuff, but it was like someone was like, "Oh yeah, and we have healthcare here, so like if you get injured during Carnival or something, like you're good." I just remember that's interesting. Like like you're not even just talking right about like yes, like the common example that like other comparably industrialized wealthy countries all have universal healthcare. It's like no, this is a
not just them.
Yeah, no, also Caribbean. Smaller state, we've got something set up. So, and I think it's that point of emphasis of just having no worries, and I think because I also think that is reflective in the polling too. That it's yes, I think it's specifically the worry potentially about losing a doctor that somebody likes. I think is substantive, and I think even more generally, and I think what's most devious and effective of the type of thing that Biden says or Clinton says or Buttigieg says is just anything that triggers anybody's fear about their healthcare coverage, because people have been so terrorized by this just completely inhumane, immoral, predator system and these parasite companies. People are petrified of any poll.
Yeah, that like, this would, Medicare for All would mean you would lose your existing insurance.
Yeah,
well, we've all been trained to start sweating when we see that phrase, lose your insurance.
Precisely, because and not versus saying like, hey, look, actually, first of all, here's how much the CEO of United Healthcare is making in compensation while, depriving America of health and threatening you personally. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of that nonsense and get everybody good health care. And but I think that that's a really important point of emphasis. And one other example, I just really briefly, I remember in college looking at in a sociology of the European Union class, we had this printout of taxes in Denmark, and people should know. I mean, we're not, even with Medicare for All, and even with free college and even with a real expansion, it still won't be the degree that it is in Denmark. I just don't think that that's any time soon. And you could sit there and even as a, pretty left perspective at the end of the chart, you're like, Jesus, that's a lot of taxes. But then what was immediately corresponding was like, okay, but now let's look at, like here's your private health insurance bill. Here's your utility bill. Here's your rent. Here's your car payment. Here's all your stuff that is not quote unquote taxes, but is mostly just much worse quality, private alternatives that are lower quality than in Denmark, much more of a hassle, and in the healthcare case can threaten your life. And it came up to basically the same amount. And so, and one objection is like, oh, well, you have a choice. But actually on most of those things, in fact, you don't have a choice, right? Like until the mandate, healthcare was probably the thing that you had the biggest choice about. And of course, that's, literally putting your life in your hands. But other things like auto insurance or owning a car or many of those things are simply not functional choices in most parts of the country. If you want to like work and keep a roof over your head, and incidentally, rent isn't a choice either. So very quickly, when you actually went over it, your obligations to worse services in the private marketplace come up to the equivalent, maybe slightly more, maybe slightly less, and almost all totally worse quality. So that's important to keep in mind as well, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just quickly, we should really push back about this rhetoric of choice, right?
Right.
You know, because if you think about what really gives people meaningful choices in life, right? If we're talking about people's freedom to live their lives the way they want to live it, I think that like choosing between Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield is not like high up on the list.
Right. Maybe having healthcare and housing and the ability and even, oh, God forbid, power over your economic life in a democratized economy so you can actually fulfill and pursue your potential in a real sense is somehow more liberating than sitting down and saying, maybe Aetna will slightly terrorize me less than United Health or Blue Cross or whatever. Right. Maybe so. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, right now, as long as most people are getting, you know, even if we do have some kind of public option for those who aren't, as long as most people are getting their insurance through their employers, that's a massive, like, piece of power that those employers have over them because, you know, you have, like, everybody has this experience. It's so normal, we don't think about it, that, you know, you're worried, oh, if I lose my job, then, you know, and I don't get another one right away, then I am going to be without health insurance, or my kids are going to be without health insurance, or even if I do get a new job right away, I'm going to have to go through this ridiculous, stressful process, figuring out a new doctor and all that stuff. And that gives people a massive incentive to stay at bad jobs.
Right. Actually, we just want to get a couple more things in the last couple of minutes, but attached to that, and there's a great book by Rob Larson called Capitalism versus Freedom that really, really makes the case quite clearly and succinctly that actually, in a functional and actual sense, capitalism is anti and antithetical to freedom in many substantive instances, like the employment and healthcare example you're talking about. Like if we're using that word in a real sense, not a, you know, Milton Friedman, like, oh, well, you know, anybody could buy a BMW if you just chose to go without food for a year, you know, like that type of nonsense that, you know, passes for argument in the libertarian and neoliberal worlds. Yes, Matt?
I mean, capitalism just means capitalists decide and not people.
Right, precisely. So on top of that, then I want you to, you know, what is it, you know, so much of this debate, and I almost want to cool it down in a way of like, there's many things I like and respect about Elizabeth Warren. I will say very clearly on foreign military policy, I do not like her views, and I actually think I have extreme disagreements and I think it is just a fundamental problem that people don't take those things as seriously. I think you have absolutely a global obligation to consider how foreign policy is going to be managed, especially because that's actually, and there's a big problem to this, but the reality is that that's the most power that a president has out of the gate. And there's very little and a lot on the other hand in her record that shows me a lot of very disturbing things. But on domestic policy, yes, it's not as left as Bernie. It's, you know, again, I just don't buy that debate, but a lot of really great stuff. And absolutely somebody who I think has genuine progressive, genuine anti-Wall Street credentials. But I like this frame that you and I have been talking about, that it's not just that Bernie's a better candidate, it's that he's different. It's something distinct in terms of the type of actual structural potential. Could you just elaborate that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not a question of being, you know, of which candidate is better, you know, in terms of like pure quantitative differences on the same scale. Bernie sees politics in a fundamentally different way than the other candidates do. That he comes out of a socialist tradition. You know, he started out, you know, his political life in the Young People's Socialist League, very influenced by the tradition of Eugene Debs. And, you know, of course, he's been in Washington for a long time, might have moderated certain views, but he still fundamentally sees politics in terms of clashes between different groups that have different interests, and mass mobilization is the thing that you need to get things done. That he has, like, when he was asked that ridiculous question at the debate about all these other states that have supposedly tried to do Medicare for all at a state level, and it hasn't worked, which is, total nonsense, false premise. Those are all states that were blocked from ever trying to implement it in the first place by usually conservative Democrats. But the great part of his answer, and the part that really goes to your question, is he said, no, we're going to get it done the same way that we got civil rights done, and all these other things that, you need to have mass engagement. And a lot of people who are centrists will sort of say, "Oh, this is a fairy tale. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get, this sort of like large numbers of people who are going to be involved in grassroots mobilization to sort of push the programs that he's talking about." But then, if that's a fantasy, then how much more of a fantasy is like what Biden is pushing, which is, I'll be able to get this incrementalist stuff done because the Republicans will come to their senses as soon as Trump is out of office. That that they'll decide to be reasonable again, right? Which he somehow believes after having been Obama's vice president for 8 years. This is a really fundamental difference. That Bernie Sanders is somebody who doesn't think that the problem is that we don't have a good enough plan, right? That's the Elizabeth Warren slogan. She's got a plan, and some of these plans really are very nice, but I think Bernie has an understanding that the problem isn't that we don't have a good, well enough technically worked out plan for what the policy would look like. The problem is that there are these fundamental structural impediments to making it happen.
So that's just undoubtedly true. And it's true to the point that actually Warren herself has actually tried to start pivoting, and she did in the debate at least, of how are you going to do this? And she said, I'm going to mobilize people. So that's another area, that's another Bernie lead on this issue. And I think another argument for Sanders is that he already does have the movement army in a way that's distinct and unparalleled as of this point. But I think and I will say in Biden's case, just to address that for a second, what will happen in Biden's case is that he could collaborate with Republicans on cutting Social Security and Medicare, which he proposed in the Obama administration, and then with his current attitude, let him launder themselves and all of the same people who are 100% aligned with the Trump white supremacy agenda and terrorizing Ilhan Omar, sit in the Rose Garden with Joe Biden and all act like they're decent people. So, in that case, his message is incredibly pernicious. But I guess the thing, and I think, frankly, particularly some members of this audience, what's your case to people who say, and I still see this, even people who watch and listen to my show, they might even understand on some level this argument, but they don't want it to be that way. In other words, they'll say and this is another difference I think that you can see, is that some people sort of see that what Sanders is saying, and again, clearly in a very moderate way, right? But there's some understanding that it isn't just corruption or lack of regulation.
Right.
There is a structure, Capitalism has a tendency to monopoly. And at the very least, you need countervailing forces. And certainly you need to totally decommodify certain areas like healthcare. Now, Warren has somewhat gone in the direction of some of those issues. But there still seems to be an attachment and an idea among the supporters that somehow, they don't want to go that far. They want it to be somehow this sort of middle of kind of reform without transformation in a way. And I just wonder if you're speaking to somebody who kind of has that view. I mean, what's your best use of argument and logic for adopting more of the structural Bernie movement view over the progressive technocratic one?
Yeah, well, I would certainly say that if you look at the empirical evidence from the last couple of decades, of attempts to do any kind of incremental reforms, that should tell you something about the impediments that exist. But it's a very hard argument to make because the very thing that makes Bernie better positioned to actually push a lot of this stuff through is the very thing that makes a lot of these people think that Warren is a more serious candidate. That the thing that, like, the fact that Warren, is very focused on the kind of wonky technical details of what the plan looks like, and she's more reluctant to make a harder pivot towards seeing things in terms of movements, is what makes her less likely to be able to get this stuff done. I mean, quite apart from the fact that even when it comes to some of the goals, like there are still some really significant differences there, right? As there's a great article in Jacobin about how, Elizabeth Warren has a plan for everything except for healthcare, for example.
No, she's been that's been a real question mark over that, for sure. And of course, student debt cancellation. She put out a good, solid liberal plan. Bernie's, no bullshit. Let's just get rid of it, right? Like nothing complicated, nothing wonky. Let's just liberate people from that. Yeah.
Which is also, and the thing is, objectively, that's much better politics, like quite apart from the fact that it's a better policy, that like there's abundant evidence that means-tested programs are a lot more politically vulnerable than universal programs. That, if there's some kind of cutoff, no matter where you put the cutoff, you're going to get gray area cases, and you're going to get people who not unreasonably think, hey, this other guy is only doing a little bit worse for me. How come I have to pay to cancel his debts, but nobody's canceling my debts, right? That's a gift to the Republicans, because that gives them talking points to push back against it. There's a reason why, means-tested programs, people can convince themselves, I'm never going to need it. This benefits some other people. Anything that's complicated, that's hard to explain. There's a reason why the Republicans, before Trump, spent years symbolically repealing Obamacare, and they could still win elections after that. Whereas in countries like Canada and the UK, even conservatives have to pretend to support the maintenance of those socialized systems, or they would never win elections. Because if everybody benefits from a program, everybody has a stake in it. Which of course doesn't mean that wealthy elites won't try to push back against it, but it's going to be so much harder for them to do so. And again, this goes to the difference, because if it's technically complicated, if it's means tested, if maybe you get full forgiveness for this group and partial forgiveness for that group, that to people who are trained to think about politics in a technocratic way, that makes it sound like a much more serious adult kind of policy, even though objectively it's much worse politics.
Right.
So it's,
as well
it's
as worse
very hard
on the merits too, because again, it's like
as well as worse on the merits.
Right. Because first of all, I mean, if you're dealing with something like the student debt crisis, why not just err on the side of getting? I mean, you're not gonna don't worry. Like even if you're like obsessed with some like wealthy scion getting away with something, guess what? They already got away with something because they have no debt because they were born in the lucky sperm. They were in the lucky sperm club, right? And then even beyond that, like actually expand in the other direction and realize that even people who have very privileged circumstances, relatively speaking, like even just in a narrow economic sense, like I'd actually would prefer a young doctor not have a third of their income eaten up by paying off predatory loans. I would actually, frankly, prefer that circulate in the economy. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, as a matter of what's going to be good for stimulating the economy, as a matter of basic justice. Like there's no, just because somebody has an upper middle class job, that doesn't actually mean that it's okay that they should be, in debt slavery, to these parasitical lenders. Like that's, which is really, I always, I always liked one of the hosts on Chapo Trap House, once summarized this point by saying that, one of the nice things about being a socialist as opposed to being a liberal is that you get to stop worrying about who deserves what. You could just say every bastard deserves better.
100%. That's great. Right. Exactly. No, that's perfectly put.
That's just such a more affirming human attitude. It's so much better on that level. but it's also something that it's going to be easier to build popular support for. People understand it. It's simple. And also, again, if everybody understands they benefit from it, there's a reason why political and media elites have been openly fantasizing about cutting Social Security for decades, but it's been very difficult for them to actually do anything in that regard because there's a huge backlash because everybody benefits from it. And of course, if, even as a matter of policy, as a matter of justice, if you say, oh, it's bad that, you're paying for the student loans or the health care or the higher education of rich people, well, hold on, why not embrace that argument consistently? If that's bad, then shouldn't we means test Social Security like right-wing Republicans want us to?
Well, or if that's bad, why don't you propose a wealth tax? More to the point.
Yeah.
Ben Burgis is author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. I love this book, and everybody I know who's read it has loved it. He teaches logic he's been teaching at Rutgers. He has a new appointment that I think will be unveiled soon. He's taught across the United States and in South Korea. And he has a Patreon page as well, which people should definitely join. I've joined it. Ben, and The Debunk on TMBS. Ben, I really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. All right, folks. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. Subscribe. Check out the AM Quickie. Sam is very excited about that. The AM Quickie with Laura Steiner and I. The things that you need.
It's Lucy Steiner.
Excuse me. What did I say?
Laura Steiner.
I'm sorry. I do know it's Lucy Steiner. Yes, I know Lucy Steiner. I think I actually know a Laura Steiner. So I apologize for that slip up. But seriously though, do check that out. It's a great condensed way of basically getting your start in a substantive way on the news of the day. JustCoffee.coop, fair trade tea, coffee, or chocolate. Check out the Majority Report blend. Spread all of the words. This coming Tuesday on the Michael Brooks Show, Crystal Ball joins us, and then also Joshua Kahn with more practical lessons for tactics, organizing, activism, work on climate change, and First Nations rights. On our last show, among many other things, we talked about redefining and enlarging human rights and post-imperial foreign policy with Daniel Bessner. This Sunday, a primer on the Sudanese Communist Party and what's happening in Sudan right now with Ahmed Cabello. Really interesting stuff. Patreon.com/TMBS. Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Subscribe now. We're first and foremost, obviously, the Patreon, but I will say that I think we're 30-something or 40-something away from our first 57,000 subscribers on YouTube. So go over there and click a subscribe. Matt, Literary Hangover.
A Literary Hangover, pretty upcoming on the podcast is going to be James Fenimore Cooper. That won't be out this Saturday. That will be out next Saturday. We're doing The Pioneers, which is sort of his first one. His dad was basically like, he created Cooperstown.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the Cooperstown where baseball was not, in fact, invented. And we go into how the sort of Last of the Mohicans novels is James Fenimore Cooper sort of rewriting his own sort of family history after his dad sort of went bankrupt and all of his holdings got liquidated in the 1820s and stuff like that. But in the 1880s and stuff, his dad was a town founder and a sort of minor aristocrat, self-taught. Because he swallowed up a bunch of loyalist lands in New York after the Revolution. So we're going to be talking about the Pioneers, but subscribe to YouTube because I'm about 27 patrons away from when I said I would start doing some video game streaming, and that's probably going to be on YouTube initially. And so you'll want to check that stuff out there. And I'm also going to get the episodes. There's 2 more episodes that need to be put up there. They should be up there in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. Calls and IMs are open. Ton to get to. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back.
boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost has what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck 'em. Almost has what?
What?
Almost has what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total
Pussy.
Welcome to the fun half, everybody. So you're going to watch this and experience this with me in real time. I had to run to the bathroom, and I came out, and Matt and Brendan asked me, how is Meghan McCain going to make the incitement against Ilhan Omar about herself? And I have a lot of very strong ideas in my mind about this, but I don't know. So it's your guess as good as mine. Let's find out together.
What to say about this one?
Look, it was really dystopian.
Yeah,
it's not.
It's crazy.
I was trying to go out to dinner and ignore politics. My family's in town, and
like every night.
Yeah, that's okay.
I came home and saw it on Twitter and then saw it on TV. And look, everyone at this table, and I think people that watch the show or have ever seen the dumpster fire that was my interview on Seth Meyers knows that I've been one of Ilhan Omar's most vocal critics on her policy regarding Israel, regarding some of her comments that I and many others interpreted as anti-Semitic. But the problem right now is you're taking away...
It was nice of her to distinguish those two things, her policy on Israel and her criticism, which is anti-Semitic. Usually, everyone, and even Meghan McCain, conflates those two things as the same thing.
I've been one of Ilhan Omar's most vocal critics on her policy regarding Israel, regarding some of her comments that I and many others interpreted as anti-Semitic. But the problem right now is...
Yeah, no, she didn't make that distinction. I would also say you and many other disingenuous morons, but go ahead.
Apologies for giving her too much credit.
Yeah, look, when in doubt, when in any situation, never give Meghan McCain credit. Because, by the way, and I say this because I'm assuming that this isn't like a nice clip where Meghan McCain just says, hey, I've smeared and demonized Ilhan Omar in the past because I'm an idiot and don't know what I'm talking about. But the president obviously should not say this. It's pretty terrible. Okay, next topic.
Israel regarding some of her comments that I and many others interpreted as anti-Semitic. But the problem right now is you're taking away my agency to criticize her policy because you're making this so much about race, xenophobia, racism. I think anytime you're hitting in a territory where you're telling any American citizen who is of a different color than you are to send them back, I too didn't think this was something that I would see in my country, especially when we're going into 2020. And let me tell you, Republicans right now, we may be in power and have...
I mean, if you're going to do the center back chance, at least do it like in 2017 or 2021.
What are you you didn't see Trump as president? What are you, moron?
No, ma'am.
Oh, my God. And now, yeah. By the way, no, ma'am, which is like McCain's like great moment. No one stops to ever remember. By the way, there was one person, and I remember this when Obama was first running for president, and no ma'am refers to some crazy woman at a McCain rally, and she really did look just like deranged, go up to McCain and say, he's an Arab, and and McCain's like, no ma'am, he's a good family man. And Colin Powell, who should primarily be remembered for going to the UN and lying about before the invasion of Iraq, he was on Meet the Press, and he endorsed Obama. And I don't remember the specifics, but I remember it stood out at the time because he said the bigger answer to John McCain should have been like, no, he's not, but so what if he was Arab or Muslim? I mean, everybody has given McCain that credit, and sure, like, obviously compared to Donald Trump, I get, fair enough, whatever. But like the subtext of that, of him literally saying like, no, he's not Arab, he's a good person, should be noted. Anyway.
And by the way, Meghan McCain's entire goal with regards to her critiques of Ilhan Omar are to remove Ilhan Omar's agency.
Yeah, purely to demonize and lie about her.
I think this was something that I would see in my country, especially when we're going into 2020. And let me tell you, Republicans right now, we may be in power and have popularity, and Trump's numbers may be real high, but let me tell you, it's my generation that's going to answer.
High among Republicans.
Yeah, they're not that high.
And have popularity, and Trump's numbers may be real high, but let me tell you, it's my generation that's going to answer for this. Try selling conservatism to a younger generation when all they see is this kind of crap on TV. And the Trump administration, all of you, Ivanka, Jared, because you're around my age range, where are you in this? Because if my parents were doing this, let me tell you.
Oh my God, that got an applause.
If my mom was reporting a child as trafficked at the airport in Phoenix, I'd have to answer to that.
Oh my God. I mean, Jesus. She gets an applause line. I'll tell you what though. That's so of course, look, she made it about her because the big take, I thought she was going to bring her dad into it more so, but she made it about her by saying that, this basically, it makes her ability to go out on TV and smear and distort and spread lies about Ilhan Omar more difficult. And I'll say that that's actually true. But you know what? Even though I'm sure Meghan McCain's one of those like, yeah, whatever, haters. Like the fact that she feels a need to come out on that segment and be like, this is horrible. That absolutely has something to do with the fact that she is basically getting constantly reminded that she represents pure privilege and a bigot party. There's no doubt about that. What is this Jeet here thing?
Jeet here tweeted out this story. Says, this in truth is a real source of a lot of anger among never-Trumpers. That Trump's blunt, forthright racism makes it harder to get away with dog whistle scurrilousness.
That's exactly right. That's 100% right.
I mean, that's not we've been making that observation since 2015.
Yeah, we've been saying that forever. But that's not, we're not even going to play it. But Mitt Romney said something the other day of like, well, these women do represent ideas that are blah, blah, blah. He did his vanilla ice cream cone version of, he's the self-deport guy. Yeah. So let's be real.
I'm to the right of Trump on immigration.
You're calling from a 303 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Matt. I'm calling from Longmont, Colorado.
Hey, Matt. What's going on? What's on your mind?
Well, I called in to make a specific comment, but
Okay.
real quick, if Meghan McCain doesn't like her party, she should leave it.
Okay.
They're just a little fast to start out with.
I think she likes her party just fine.
Yeah, me too. So I like your phrase, no sidelines. I've used that same phrase before, but in terms of not voting. I often hear that, people say that nagging or telling people they should vote is finger wagging. It's a bad thing. But isn't that a form of standing on the sidelines? And are we not in a time of crisis where not voting is almost an injustice, or is an injustice to people falling victim to this administration's and this party's atrocities? Isn't it time to get involved before it's too late, if it isn't already?
Well, I mean, I guess that's I kind of answer you in two ways. I mean, I actually think the bigger point that you're making about needing to be involved to some degree now is it requires a lot more than voting. And it clearly, frankly, I mean, look, I'm totally a strategic voting person. And at the same time, I don't know how much more clear it can get that most Democrats, and certainly the Democratic leadership class, are absolutely not the people to actually reverse this. And in fact, oftentimes they're active co-participants in this. So that's one thing. I think in general, I don't know, man. I have no problem, and I can already hear like a certain contingent. This is a classic answer that will dissatisfy everybody. I can hear a contingent of people saying, "This is the same guy that told me to vote for Hillary, even though it hurt my feelings that I couldn't vote for Jill Stein." Right. So they'll be pissed off because they'll say I'm a hypocrite, because I'm going to say, look, I don't think in general that's the foot to lead on, right? Across the board, I think appealing to people's better nature, if you can really do it, like someone like Cornel West can, and getting to people's sense of urgency is important. I think hectoring and moralizing to people, frankly, about anything is not the way to do it, whether it's voting or anything else, right? You got to meet people where they are, and you got to have an appealing approach. So I would definitely not take that frame. I do think the no sidelines thing, though, works for a lot of things. You could say, hey, look, it's time to take action in this. But, I don't know, man. It's a complicated message and I want to wait a very long time before we start talking about that, because we're not in that situation right now. Like right now, we're in a situation where you don't have to just vote. You can organize and vote for Bernie Sanders. You don't have to just vote. You can, if you're able, give a campaign contribution to one of these 4 congresswomen. You can, there's infinite numbers of local races and initiatives. You can, you can reward Ro Khanna for his, really significant anti-intervention, anti-war work right now. So that's not the right time. I mean, I don't even want to. I'm superstitious enough that I don't want to have a fucking Joe Biden's the nominee thing, right? I don't want to do that right now. Right. But, that situation comes to it, I'll say right now, once again, if Joe Biden is the nominee, I will recommend that if people are in a swing state that they vote for Joe Biden. But that is not what I want to reduce politics to, and that's not where politics are right now.
Yeah, I want to comment on that part, because I've been tweeting out a couple times saying that if Joe Biden is the nominee, I'm not going to vote for him.
I'm not going to vote for him either. I live in New York.
The truth of that, the full statement there is, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden in New York. Now, before he wins the primary, I'm going to just for propaganda purposes, because I don't think the vote really matters, whether I vote for some third party or Joe Biden.
Sure.
That's not really why I'm saying that out loud to my followers. I'm saying that to send a message about Joe Biden. Now, Absolutely. Of course, if Joe Biden wins the primary, I'm going to be spending. Oh my God, it's going to suck.
Point, don't go there.
Yeah,
don't go there now, and don't hector and moralize at people.
Right.
But I think no sidelines is strong and clear, because it is saying, it's like, on one hand, you can't go and lay a whole trip on people, and then on the other hand, you also just have to say, and that is why in some ways it's simpler than voting in a way. In this case, it's like, you are going to tell me Because take somebody. I'm sorry, I'm going all over the place here, but I forget her name. But there's some editor at the Forward who's constantly instigating nonsense and smears against Ilhan Omar.
Batya Ungar Sargon of
Yes,
Akkad.
horrible. Yes. Now I have very little doubt that she'll probably vote, and she'll probably, and I would assume she'll vote for a Democrat. She'll vote the right way against Trump. But not only is she on the sidelines, she's usually on the wrong team when it comes to Ilhan Omar. So, in some ways, it's so simple and it's so unequivocal. Especially now, especially in the environment we're in, where we're actually having a battle about, we have the primary, we have clear, stark choices in the primary. And we have a clear, stark choice inside the Democratic House.
Inter-party conflict
we have
right now.
Serious inter-party conflict where, if anything, frankly, Schumer and Pelosi have facilitated what Trump is doing. If Hoyer and Pelosi and Schumer did not go to AIPAC several months ago and co-sign against Omar to varying degrees, it would be, Trump would probably, look, I'm not going to lie, Trump would probably do it anyways, but it would be clear that there was not buy-in to this outside of the racist core of Republicanism.
Right.
They've opened up a much broader lane, just as they open up a broader lane by having how many Democratic, operatives are lobbying against Medicare for all and against people's health for the parasite insurance industry. How many, even by the metric of people who are in the resistance, who are obsessed with a more narrow set of things than people on the left. Where's Nancy Pelosi saying she supports Al Green, who, by the way, Al Green's argument for impeachment, to me, that's like, yes, I still don't know what has been proven or not proven about Russia, frankly. I still don't even see how fundamentally different we are from where we were a couple years ago, saying there's something there, it's questionable, and so on, right? We know for a fact that this guy is a bigot and inciting. And my understanding of Al Green's impeachment articles is that it focuses on that. And it's true. So impeach the motherfucker. They're not doing that. So, look.
Well, I do. I think that voting is more than, tomorrow's election day, I better go vote. I wonder who I should vote for. And that, these days more than ever, it should be taken as serious as possible. I woke up Monday thinking it was still hyperbole to think that America could become fascist. But then here it is Thursday morning. And that stuff he was saying at the rally last night was off the teleprompter.
Matt, I agree, but I agree with you, but that's precisely why it's got to be bigger than voting and a much broader engagement. Because clearly,
it just feels like you have 1,000 candles in every room of your house, but you won't invest in a fire extinguisher. That's what it's like to be an American at the moment to me. And silly analogy aside.
Well, I don't even think, frankly, people did vote in higher rates in 2018. Like, you can't.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, so right now it needs to be a much bigger set of activities, and it also needs to be a fight to get, look, I won't pretend to not have a clear choice here, but it needs to be Bernie Sanders. You need to be on the right side of this inter-party conflict. And I agree with you. I'm of the school that you can't. That was part of my thing in 2016. I saw what Donald Trump was saying, and I believed it. And I also knew that he wasn't going to do anything for the he wasn't going to do any of this economic populism stuff, please. But I knew that he could make things even worse, for the immigrant community. And I knew that having a president who was overtly racist like that would be really significant for people who would catch hell in ways that I won't because of my identity, right? That's just reality. And I knew that toxic identity, white identity politics was profoundly dangerous. So it was my obligation to say, this just needs to be stopped, even though Hillary Clinton is absolute trash. And even though Hillary Clinton is part of a political class that, among many other reasons, but absolutely the complete corruption and failure of modern centrist neoliberal politics absolutely has facilitated this across the globe. That's, people who would deny the identity and race end are kidding themselves or lying. And then conversely, people that would deny the corruption and facilitation of neoliberalism are lying and delusional. So, I agree with you, but especially right now, we're not talking about that. It's not 24 hours before Election Day. It's a much bigger battle right now. And we need to fight that much bigger battle because it's not just about getting rid of Trump. You got to get rid of the conditions of Trump. And right now, Nancy Pelosi's part of the conditions of Trump. If Joe Biden's elected president, I mean, look, I know I'm saying a lot here, but the last thing I'll say, if Joe Biden is elected president, and again, I know a certain type of idiot will use this in the opposite direction and be like, see, you said it yourself. If Joe Biden is nominee, there's no good scenario. But every scenario of Donald Trump not being reelected is absolutely necessary, right? But if you elect Joe Biden,
right,
you will have 4 years of the same economic conditions, inequality, and deepening crisis, which Democratic leaders have expanded and increased and facilitated themselves for decades because he's part of that same right-wing neoliberal class. Then he will allow Republicans to rebrand themselves and get away from the embarrassment of Trumpism, all in time for, another thug, maybe a less eccentric one. Maybe Tom Cotton 2024 takes out, an unpopular Joe Biden. You got to get rid of the underlying conditions. And that's bigger than voting, although I do think you should vote. I appreciate the call, man. I'm sorry. There's just a lot to process here. Let's actually just do something fun for a second. Dave Rubin was consistently, thoroughly dunked on by Marianne Williamson. I know we at least have the shorter clip. The 30. There's 12 and 13. Let's just play 13. You don't have it on the list? We didn't play it. All right, sorry guys. So there's it's 13 on the list. Maybe I do need to be more like Sam. Basically Dave Rubin, he did a postmortem about it, which was kind of funny. Maybe we'll play it later, but honestly, I think because things are just so heightened right now, it was just so depressing. Just the complete moral and intellectual vacuum of the guy. I'm not sure that I want to actually deal with right now. Do we not have?
Do you know where it's just the one where it's the Dave Rubin edited clip, right?
Yeah, it's 30 seconds.
No, yeah, I know. Do you know where you sent that to us in?
I didn't. I assumed we had it left over from yesterday. It's all right, guys. It's fine. I thought we clipped it yesterday. All right, maybe we'll get to that later. Glenn Kessler, Brock from Virginia. Glenn Kessler fact check for Marianne Williamson's slander on the Rubin Report. When Dave asked her if collective thinking will inspire guilt and resentment, Marianne said, no, people are smart, Dave. What she should have said is, quote unquote, most people are smart, since the person she was talking to was clearly not smart. 2 Pinocchios. Sorry, Michael, your girl is canceled. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's a very effective Kessler fact check. Greg from Oklahoma. My Democratic congressperson has kept their promise to vote against a $15 minimum wage. Her video saying why she voted against it, she evoked the name of my hometown, saying the cost of living isn't the same as San Francisco. She got ratioed on Twitter for voting against it. Thank God. I'm extremely disappointed, but not surprised she voted against it. Next time, tell us her name. It's a horrible vote. Okay. Let's do these Bernie sounds. Yesterday, Bernie Sanders did a really important speech on Medicare for all. And there's the lies are back. Joe Biden is lying incessantly about this. Pete Buttigieg and others are pretending that there's some universal system that isn't really a universal system, that costs will go up, even though in the aggregate they'll go down, and the quality of care and basic material security will be not just increased, just incomparable. We'll go from a system where tens of millions of people, even after Obamacare, still don't have care. Many others are underinsured. Millions prematurely die, and it's a still fundamental threat to people. To every human being in this country has health coverage, period. No bullshit. So this was a funny video. This is number 7. Bernie wants to know what the deal with people lying about Medicare for All is.
Now, my Republican friends and some others
Splinter put this together.
seem to think that the American people hate paying taxes, but they just love paying insurance premiums. Oh my God, dear, the insurance premium is here. What a wonderful day. Oh, wow. Let's celebrate. Hey, another $2,000 a month for insurance, and small businesses, they just love it every month, paying those insurance premiums. The truth of the matter is that study after study has shown that as a nation we will save substantial sums of money, and the average middle-class family will save an estimated $3,000 each and every year on their health care bills.
Bernie Sanders is ready to rumble because he's cared about this. He's fought for everybody to have health care his whole political career. And he's also explaining why the idea that this can't be done in a bold, effective way is nonsense.
You know, I want to say a word about this transition because I hear over and over again from political opponents, from the industry, it can't be done. Stop and think about the year 1965 when Medicare was first introduced. They did not have then the kind of technology that we have right now. They were developing a brand new program with all of the difficulty that entails. So please do not tell me that 55 years later, with all of the technology that we have, that we cannot simply over a 4-year period expand a successful program that is 55 years old.
Look, it's purely a question of political will and power. Any technical arguments are lies, distractions, and nonsense. This is a question of fulfilling and expanding a program that already works extraordinarily effectively and giving it to every American. This is another reminder, as with yesterday with the Bank of America exchange. This is why he is the one that's hated by Wall Street. This is the why, the first the reports were anybody besides Sanders and Warren. Now the reports are anybody besides Sanders, because Bernie Sanders represents a fundamental threat to a way of doing things that is a fundamental threat to 99% of Americans. It is demented and insane that private insurance companies that provide absolutely nothing of value, they are purely an unnecessary predatory barrier between you and your doctor, and a waste of all of our money and resources, are not phased out in favor of a national program, which is spelled out in great comprehensive detail in the Bernie Sanders Senate bill, as well as the Pramila Jayapal House bill. And these other candidates that still sort of are wishy-washy on it, Booker, Harris, at times Warren, they should be asked very specifically, along with, people who are just more, flagrantly dishonest and right-wing and of the insurance industry, like Biden, Buttigieg. What precisely do you mean about the difficulty of the transition? Not talking points, not stuff that, kids could copy and paste from Forbes magazine onto a term paper. What do you actually mean? Because those answers in substance and merit are not there, and they've been answered in actual legislation. All right, we have this Dave Rubin clip. This is who did this on Twitter? This is at Emily Cohen B. I watched this about 20 times yesterday. I texted it to everyone. Like literally practically everyone. There were even a couple of people that I tried to explain who Dave Rubin was just so I could send this. And it always got incredible response. As I said, Dave Rubin's postmortem on the debate, of course, he learned nothing. None of his empathy was expanded. He is the perfect fusion of craven and cynical. And if you don't know who Dave Rubin is, look up who he receives funding from. Then look up his exchange with Joe Rogan on the UPS code.
Check out Timba on Toast on YouTube.
Check out Timba on Toast on YouTube. Watch any video that we've done on him. And also look at the before and after titles on the absolutely morally repugnant videos he's done with Stefan Molyneux. And then, yes, the answer to that question is he really is that stupid. And I think that this 30 seconds after he's schooled from Marianne Williamson, we've got the perfect doorway into the Rubin brain.
Well, do you think there's a little bit of a risk in sort of, I mean, a couple of times you're referencing the genocide of the Jews to slavery. Seems like a little bit of a slippery slope there, no?
I don't even know how we can say that, actually, and I say that as a Jew. Have you read up much on slavery?
Yeah.
We're talking abject slavery, Dave. I mean, nobody's in a contest. Nobody has a monopoly on human suffering. This was abject slavery.
What do you think?
Can we just the last, just because it's so beautiful, because she's looking at him and she's so patient. She really does have the patience of this is somebody who definitely has done some work on themselves to have this level of patience, because just even watching this in and out, we were responding almost in real time on Tuesday night on TNBS. And you finally get to a point where you're just like, Jesus Christ, how can you be so fucking stupid and so fucking empathy free? It's incredible. And she finally has this slight crack, like, yeah, Dave, actually the mass bondage and murder of human beings, yeah, that was pretty bad. And then just one more time, because it's amazing.
Referencing the genocide of the Jews to slavery seems like a little bit of a slippery slope there, no?
I don't even know how we can say that, actually, and I say that as a Jew. Have you read up much on slavery?
Yeah.
We're talking abject slavery.
Pause it. Oh my God, 10 million Pinocchios. Where's Glenn Kessler? Fact check.
Yeah.
Dave, actually, by the way,
name several books.
In a super, let's be fair, in a super polite, respectful way, and you will probably get blocked anyways, if you have not been yet, go to Dave Rubin's Twitter and ask him if he could name 2 books. And this is the honor system. Okay, because obviously, if you're like me, you immediately, books on slavery, better go and look them up online.
It literally doesn't matter if he has read them or not. The ones he cites anyway will be revealing.
Dinesh D'Souza, slavery was great. But honestly, look up, ask him, Dave, you said, yeah, in response to Marianne Williamson's question that you read about slavery. Could you name 2 books? Because again, I want to be realistic and slightly fair here, because I don't get the impression that this is a big reader. Name 2. Tweet at him. I'm really curious to see his reading list.
You know how fun it'd be to go back and forth with Dave, just mentioning books that you've read about slavery. See how far, who can go farther.
A little bit of a slippery slope there, no?
No.
I don't even know how we can say that, actually, and I say that as a Jew. Have you read up much on slavery?
Yeah.
We're talking abject slavery.
Such a bluff.
I mean, nobody's in a contest. Nobody has a monopoly on human suffering. This was abject slavery.
Does anybody know what that's from?
I don't know, but that's the most Dave Rubin thing I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God. When you think of Dave Rubin, think of complete amorality and spilt milk. There are major demonstrations going on in Puerto Rico right now. I don't know if we have any footage of it. So in the last couple of weeks or week or so, there's been a scandal that has been set off by the a big set of leaked telegram and text messages between the governor, Ricardo Rosello, and various members of his team, supporters, cabinet, and so on. Part of the top lines has been that this is, there's a lot of just sort of crude stuff. There's a lot of homophobia, a lot of transphobia, so on. There's a lot of really disgusting comments about poor people and so on. And they've said, hey, it's just us kind of blowing off steam. But the more broad and really the structural stuff and the things that are actually dropping today point to bribe and corruption networks in the Puerto Rican government. So then there's massive demonstrations taking place on the street. They've been met with riot gear and a really brutal response. Celebrities like Ricky Martin and Benicio del Toro have actually flown back to back the protests.
Ricky Martin was mentioned in the text messages
because it was a homophobic.
Right?
Yeah, it was a homophobic comment about Ricky Martin, exactly. And this is really important, and all solidarity with Puerto Rico. Obviously, I think that right now it would be fair to say there isn't a specific cast to this right now. It does seem to represent a pretty broad section of society that are just sort of totally disgusted by the corruption, the buffoonishness, the bigotry of Ricardo Rosello and the current Puerto Rican government. And the broader conversation you always have to have with Puerto Rico, though, is that if these corruption networks and these revelations go deeper, I have no doubt that you will see connections to politicians, obviously, from both parties in the mainland. You will see how a small group of corrupt politicians and networks have benefited from a colonial system in Puerto Rico that is shockingly unjust to most Puerto Ricans, that benefits predatory capital and hedge fund managers in the mainland. And you'll also have to get to the bigger history here of a truly brutal colonization. If you read Nelson Denis's War Against All Puerto Ricans, you'll know of periods of U.S. military administered martial law in Puerto Rico, of Puerto Rican independence activists becoming political prisoners, of mass killings. That's all been in Puerto Rico. Then you add in Vieques, the island of Vieques had which is a small. I mean, I spent some time there recently. It's a very ecologically vulnerable, small, and high poverty levels place. The U.S. military was testing serious munitions on the island. Local people died in military accidents as well. And people are reporting that the protests against the government are the biggest seen in Puerto Rico since the movements against the U.S. military testing in Vieques. So this is really significant. But I want to bring that bigger context in because ultimately, whether it's McKinsey, I did a conversation obviously about McKinsey's role as consultants in administering increasing poverty and slashing public education in Puerto Rico. All of the same systems of corporate domination and austerity linked with corrupt local political structures and capital are all in Puerto Rico, amplified by the fact that it still is literally a U.S. colony in actuality. Taxation without representation, like D.C., like Guam. A new poll was released saying that recently, actually today, reported in Politico, that two-thirds of Americans support statehood for Puerto Rico. 2 in 3 Americans support statehood for the island of Puerto Rico, according to a Gallup poll released Thursday morning. The 66% the 66% support for admitting the island as the 51st state is consistent with polling dating back to the early 1960s. Support is highest amongst Democrats, younger voters, and non-white voters. But nearly half of Republicans also back the proposal, which is impressive. Party leaders do not. Then it goes on to talk about Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell's despicable and bigoted treatment of Puerto Rico. Although, again, this is a very bipartisan thing. Democratic Party's relationship to Puerto Rico is incredibly pernicious and in some cases deeply corrupt.
That difference between the GOP leadership and the GOP voters. GOP is basically the GOP itself, the actual body of like basically political hacks, is like the mind, the racist mind, and the voters are the GOP partisans are the racist heart of America.
Right. And so I always say, look, I mean, Puerto Rico is a colony. Puerto Rico should choose its own fate, whether it wants independence as a nation state or if it wants to be a state in the United States. It should be 100% up to Puerto Ricans. But as a matter of both, the right thing to do and political strategy, every single Democrat should be pushing every single second for Puerto Rican statehood. It is a bare minimum, and I would frame it as have a referendum and Puerto Rico decides. Obviously, the status quo is completely unacceptable. It is a colony in one of the most economically. I mean, if you look at things like the Jones Act, the fact that Puerto Rico has to pay an importation tax on some of its own products that it self produces, but has to go back out of the country and be reimported in. It's an obscene, exploitative system. So it needs to be up to them. But every single Democrat should be saying, if they want it, we will fight our hearts out for a 51st state with Puerto Rico, as well as voting representation, obviously, for Washington, D.C., Guam, and also there's actually several Caribbean islands that could fall into this as well. But Puerto Rico is central focal point of that. And these protests are incredibly important. Let's see. Let's take another call. You're calling from a 312? Are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, I'm here, I think.
Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling
Hello?
from? Yeah, what's up?
I'm Will. I'm calling from Chicago.
Will from Chicago. What's on your mind?
We had the elections here in Chicago, so, I think it kind of was an exciting time. I don't want to go into that too much. So I really want to talk just a little bit about healthcare, but I want to sort of frame it, in coming out of those elections, as an activist, I kind of realized we needed to build our vision a little bit more if we're really going to clean up from the types of messes we see created by, the neoliberals. And so one area I kind of see where we could talk a little further, I think, one, to kind of get people excited, but one, so that when you kind of take control or you make progress like we have in Chicago, you have something specific to push for.
You're talking about all of the DSA people being elected to city council?
It was a pretty impressive election, but we also got a new mayor who, you can say what you want about her, but she doesn't owe as many people, and I think she's definitely moving in the right direction. I'm pretty excited about that.
I've heard very mixed things about her, but okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm making up my mind too, but I'm actually seeing what she's doing, and I'm realizing, anyway, I won't get into that too much. I won't get to my main point, which was,
okay, yeah, go ahead.
When you were Ted, just when it comes to things like Medicare for all, I think we also need to expand the conversation to, pushing for things like public health, because that's ultimately what we need to put in place to clean up this kind of choice or anti-expertise or anti-system framework. And I had this experience with my son when he was younger. I was taking him to his regular pediatrician, and she's like, oh, yeah, he's passing him on all these developmental milestones. But then the state of Illinois came in to his daycare and was like, administer these tests. They do it to every kid, right? That's public health. That's how you do it, right? Mm-hmm. And when they did, they're like, oh, he's got all these, developmental delays, milestones he's not meeting, and gave a much broader picture. And then they followed up. They sent, I think this is called early intervention. I think it's part of Head Start. I'm not sure. But they sent, 3 people to the house who are, speech therapists. I think it was, OT. It doesn't matter. But they sent these 3, specialists to the house. They did further evaluation. And then they actually gave him some therapy right away. They, assigned him some therapy this many hours a week and got things rolling for him. And I know a lot of kids who've had that, and it's really helped them out. But then, when we get back into the private system, wait 6 months to see a specialist, then that specialist maybe tells you, if your insurance covers it, you might go for this therapy. Or they might not make any recommendation at all,
Yep.
So I think that's part of the conversation we can have. And I think John from San Antonio was kind of talking about that a little bit too. Like, Bernie's getting beat up on, like, you want to get rid of regular insurance. He's not giving the full vision, which is one, it's going to be cheaper. But one, we can start to build in these systems that are really missing. When you dumped all that money into rehab, you hear these.
Well, he talked a lot about we didn't pull anything, but he talked a lot about dental insurance yesterday. That's another really important example of the need for dental insurance and all the other things, mental health, everything. I agree with you completely. I mean, there's a huge terrain to work on there because healthcare is absolutely barbarous and doesn't work in America. Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it. You're calling from a 409 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it's me, Cleo, from Southeast Texas.
Hey, Cleo, what's on your mind? What do you got?
Well, I was wondering, how would you go about, or anybody at the studio go about trying to really get into politics and make it their career?
Matt, does anybody have any ideas?
I mean, I think you got to start making actual local connections. I mean, I have a buddy who moved up here. Well, this is somebody else's path, but I'll just relay it. He moved up here. Basically, got a finance degree. Moved up here, worked for Bank of America a little bit, and then he went and did investor relations for another company. And he did all of this to make money because he wanted to spend it on his own political campaigns back in another state. And he's now currently finding out that he has friends that have still been in Texas that have been working up within the Democratic Party. And it's a kind of interesting thing because he's more to the left of them, for instance, but they're more in the party. So they come to him with sort of questions about, like, how do we deal with this Ilhan Omar stuff, or what is our how do we talk about Medicare for all or this Green New Deal stuff, because frankly a lot of the staffers for actual Democrats don't know about this stuff. So, and basically, long story short, my friend is going to move back and get in with those groups of people with his knowledge. But I don't know. I think you kind of have to. I don't have anything more specific than that.
Honestly, that to me though, it's like the funny thing about politics, for as totally fucked up as it is, it does to me seem sort of like a field where. I mean, you can read some bios of including people who are, frankly, like they've done nothing that's good with their political power, but they did get starts that are super like, they went and canvassed for a campaign. They went and got involved in some local initiative, and they had a talent and a capacity.
Being there is important.
Honestly, being there is the most important thing. So whatever your local thing is, I'm sure there's a Democratic Party. Maybe there's a DSA. Maybe there's an initiative to save a public library. I mean, go there if you care about it. Get to know people. Put in some work. That's it. And then, sure. And then there's a whole other corollary to it, which I think probably we could speak more to, which is you can also then, you can build out a platform of your political thoughts, beliefs, and also very much, if you're doing this, your activism on social media as well, which is complementary. But the most important thing is to pick something you identify with and go get involved in it. And because I haven't heard of a single political story that doesn't, to some extent, will work like that, basically.
Well, okay, thank you. I was,
you're welcome.
Just thinking about.
Look locally. There's gonna be stuff, and then find out what resonates with you, and to the extent you have any time, obviously I know everybody's super busy, but go do it. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, and before I go, I should mention that we have in. Excuse me, but I can't remember the district, but it's Jefferson County and I believe Hardin County. Mm-hmm. But we have a representative running against Chris Webber, who has been basically a thorn in the side of Democrats and everybody really who wants to get anything done. So if you're going to the polls and you're from Jefferson or Hardin, vote against Chris Webber, vote Democrat. She's
Thanks.
the only one running against.
Thank you. Appreciate the call, man. Go work for that campaign.
No problem.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Sounds like your answer might be there if that's close by.
Shame Chris Webber's gone so far down.
It's the same Chris Webber.
I don't think so.
All right, one more call. Let me just gonna try to. All right, you're calling from a 301 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi.
Hi.
This is Josh from Maryland.
Hey, Josh. What's going on? What's on your mind?
I just wanted to hear your thoughts on something I've been thinking about when it comes to socialized medicine, which I support, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we would have to regulate some of the dietary intakes of Americans in order to...
I'm sorry. I'm not laughing. I just know that how much this is going to trigger people. I mean,
yeah. I'm actually surprised I don't hear like detractors bring this up. Like, for example, European Union banned flavored cigarettes as a way to sort of combat that because everyone's paying for lung disease, basically. So they're trying to curb that.
They
as
also,
much as possible.
that's a good point. What Brendan just said. They all smoke.
Yeah, and it also makes me remember
they're disgusting.
How people reacted when New York tried to ban gallon-sized sodas.
Whoa, Brendan just said Europeans are disgusting off mic. Just in full disclosure.
I did not say that.
Brendan was like, yeah. Brendan's like, take a shower, take the cigarette out of your mouth. Hey, man, I'm sorry. I don't really know what to say about it. I think there's no doubt that I think, to be honest, a more useful way of framing this would be to connect socialized medicine with environmental protection and what we need to do about ecology, because there's a lot of areas like air pollution that is not only bad for people's health, it's causing premature loss of life and asthma outbreaks and things like that are, majorly impactful on people. Another area that you could deal, here's another way of thinking it, right? The reason people hate things like the soda ban is because it is elitist and controlling, and it doesn't correlate with anything else. So part of the reason that junk food is so ample and so cheap and so available, and why there's places where there's food deserts is a real term, where you can both go to neighborhoods where you can, by the way, both not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables and then actually have higher retail prices than at other places, right? Like worst of both worlds. And part of the reason is because of the corn subsidy system. Like we subsidize major agribusinesses that have monopolistic control on industries and a corrupt corporate relationship with government that makes certain foods, which incidentally are horrible for the environment, have abusive work chains, extremely cheap and plentiful for people. And, and it's funny because I'm not somebody, I know that we can get into some kind of like very obscure woke discourses where people get upset when you even suggest that there are, relatively speaking, healthy or not healthy decisions. And I'm sorry, like that's nonsense. Of course, people have some agency and control over their health to some degree. And I have no problem with acknowledging that and, encouraging whatever. But the big picture reason of why there's so many health problems and things like heart disease and breathing and respiratory issues and obesity epidemics is because of, well, one, I mentioned things like air pollution, and two, because we have a food system that subsidizes and makes food that's really bad for people cheap and plentiful, and that's what's available. And incidentally, that food is actually also usually quite addictive and loaded with things that are horrible for people. So instead of like demonizing people and trying to control their behavior and these like, I will admit, like it's funny for me to say this because I'm a socialist across the board. I think you should have a little bit of that allergy to the idea that, like, you know, Mike Bloomberg sits in his limo and like, oh, there's so many fat people. Well, I'm going to ban the big gulp. Versus what is it in our entire food system, which I have no doubt that Mike Bloomberg, I'm sure at the very least, benefits from being a billionaire through his investments, that generates so much lack of health and disease across the country. If you want to deal with that, you have to break up ag monopolies. You have to re-incentivize different forms of food production. You have to get healthy, fresh foods in the school lunch and breakfast programs, and you have to take on air pollution. And that's how we can help improve people's health. Yes. Yes,
Okay.
Matt. Yeah.
All right. You give me a lot to think about here. Thanks for taking my call, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's my pleasure. Thank you, man.
I would just point out two things. Philosophy Tube has a good video on healthcare and postmodernism that goes into why we shouldn't even go down the lane of deserving versus undeserving unwell or sickness, for instance.
What is he? Oh, okay. I understand.
But I also, oh shoot, I just forgot the other point I was going to make about that. Damn it.
There is a very troubling dialectic that you can look into between things. And again, I'm not going into the opposite direction here. There's no question that on balance, it is better to eat healthy. It's better to exercise. Like, you have the capacity to do those things. You should do them. And I'm not interested in pretending that that's not the case or that's somehow wrong to say, right? That's ridiculous. But conversely, the rhetoric of wellness is incredibly punitive and neoliberal and obscures the real reasons why most people have health problems. And urban design, that's another reason. I mean, you have most people, even taking the European example, it's not inconsequential that people have to walk everywhere and are able to do that. That actually has a health effect. So if you want to, get into that stuff, it's not about moralizing and controlling individuals. It's about redesigning systems that are bad for people's health.
Right, and societal obesity is not an individualist problem,
Not
right?
at-
So here's a stat that
Not at
I
all.
came up with when this
Yeah.
is the second day in a row I mentioned I used to work at Vice, but we did a food episode. 50 states currently have an obesity rate over 20%. In 1995, that was 0 states.
Right. No, it's
corporations.
It's corporations. I mean, you don't need to. And honestly, like the stuff about like corn and the ag system, you don't even need to put on your socialist hat. You could read a good, solid Michael Pollan book. It's not that obscure to understand how those dynamics work. And by the way, I would recommend reading Michael Pollan book. He does an amazing job at explaining how these things work. Another area where Bernie Sanders has put forward the most aggressive, and Elizabeth Warren is not far behind with some real plans on this, with which nobody else has put anything on the table. And those are not just hugely important for rural America. When you start getting into those subsidy systems, that affects the entire country, and quite seriously. So that's the way to talk about a durable public health system. You're calling from an 818 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, what's up, Michael? Dave.
Dave from Jamaica. TMBS
Mhm.
contributor Dave from Jamaica. Dave, how are you?
Didn't know I got upgraded.
Yes, sir. What's on your minds?
Well, to kind of pick up back on Marianne Williamson, I saw her thing with Dave Rubin. I changed my mind. She's moved up to a solid third choice now.
Not the
Not
second
quite
choice?
second, but
I don't get that.
No, she did better. I think when she started out, I know the rhetoric was more to educate Dave, a futile task that might be, but the two sidings of thing does really grind on my nerves, I guess.
understand.
But I guess it is I guess she was legitimately trying to teach Dave. So
She went where it needed to go. She went where it needed to go.
Yeah.
Anything else on your mind?
Other than that, to the last caller's point, restrictions are like the last thing you want to do.
Right.
If you want healthier outcomes in general, as you said, you want to promote healthier choices. In other words, instead of subsidizing the fast food stuff, subsidize healthy foods. Make them cheaper, make them the more economical choice. That's one way to start. As you said, free parks. Hell, if I had the money, I'd even make government put out free health trainers out there too.
That's not a bad idea at all. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a whole other thing. Why, like having, basketball courts and tennis courts and soccer fields and base, like that's a public health question. Does your town have a good park? Is there an area you can run and walk? I mean, all of these systems are the baselines of, the health issues that people have agency over. Those are also totally social questions.
Right. And it has a kind of knock-on effect. Like we have social isolation issues in the modern world.
Definitely.
If you do that helps beat down that thing too. People socialize. People stop going into their computer rooms complaining about being incels and shit.
Yep.
It's all kind of connected.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Yep.
So that's all I got, Mike. So
that's beautiful. I appreciate it.
A literary hangover.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. This was a powerful moment. Well, actually, let's do two disgusting ones, then we'll do a powerful one. So Lindsey Graham, I mean, we know who Lindsey Graham is. Lindsey Graham is a sycophant. His game has always been to put himself in proximity to a more powerful, charismatic person than him and play the game of power through them. So, everybody likes to point out that, in 2015 and 16, he called Trump a racist and a xenophobe and all the rest of it. And it's, oh, Lindsey, what happened? Nothing happened. Donald Trump was elected president, and Lindsey Graham has no convictions and no concern about anything. So he moved in proximity to power. And there are a fair amount of people like this in politics. I mean, I don't think focusing on, individuals is really going to be the way to understand how these systems work, but it can draw, just a kind of, just a vacuous parasite personality like Lindsey Graham, whose only consistent interest, and the only way in which he, carries the John McCain torch is a endless appetite for war, and a robust lack of concern about other human beings' lives, whether it's Iran, North Korea, Syria, or anywhere else. The other day, he went on Donald Trump is giving all of these people permission. They want to go on what seem like unhinged, drunk, racist tirades on Fox. So
it's good media for them.
It's good media for them. It's probably what they really think anyways. Look, it's a lot of what Democrats frankly really think. I mean, that is what's so clarifying about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, right? Is that a lot of people, even people who've made a whole career of supposedly showing about how decent and responsible they are, they're not. They don't want any form of threat to what they perceive to be the natural order. And then if you're Lindsey Graham, though, you still want some plausible deniability. But at the same time, in the plausible deniability, you still have to work to Donald Trump's insatiable ego. And it leads to a fusion like this, which, by the way, this is true. I think this is a true statement.
I think the president is playing on the 1968 love it or leave it. I've said before that if you're a Somali refugee wearing a MAGA hat, he doesn't want to send you back. You probably have dinner at the White House. What does that tell me? That it's about the criticism and the critic.
That's just the cheap. I mean, look, we all know that this, notion that there's some type of non-racialized nationalism is a lie and delusional. And, people are either unable to understand why that's the case, so they're deluded, or other people understand that they still want some plausible deniability strategically. And by the way, it's also true. I have no doubt. I would not be surprised, and this is another really important thing to watch in this campaign, and and especially as we hold media hacks accountable, Donald Trump is going to pour the fumes on the race war and incite and incite and incite and incite. And particularly as you get closer to general election time, he absolutely is going to do moves like that to confuse the discourse, to create plausible deniability, and get the counterintuitive take from Jake Tapper. So you might see a Somali refugee with a MAGA hat. In fact, a Somali refugee with a MAGA hat that sets up some type of Trumpist YouTube channel would be an amazing business opportunity right now.
Yeah, I mean, when Trump did his Muslim ban, which included Somalians, I don't think he had a provision in there saying they can come if they have MAGA hats.
No, he did not say. He said no Somalis can come. And speaking of the game here, Kellyanne Conway, she hasn't been on the radar for a while, nor should she be. She's still in the White House. She plays this whole game with her husband, where her husband, says what Trump is, and then she's one of Trump's biggest sycophants. So supposedly, a lot of the reporting is that she actually also briefs against Trump. She's exactly the sort of just, completely deranged, grotesque thing that would be in this administration. And this is what you're going to hear from them even more aggressively moving forward. Here she is playing the race game herself.
Got it. On the previous question, if the president was not telling these four congresswomen to return to their supposed countries of origin, to which countries was he referring?
What's your ethnicity?
Why is that relevant?
No, because I'm asking you a question. My ancestors are from Ireland and Italy.
My own ethnicity is not relevant to the question I'm asking.
No, it is, because you're asking about, he said originally. He said originally from. And you know everything he has said since, and to have a full conversation. The president's already commented on that. The president's already commented on that, and he said a lot about this since that one tweet. No, he's put out a lot of tweets, and he made himself available to all of you yesterday.
A lot of tweets.
Yes, he has. He's tired. A lot of us are sick and tired of this country, of America coming last, to people who swore an oath of office. Sick and tired of our military being denigrated. Sick and tired of the Customs and Border Patrol people, the protection people I was with, who are overwhelmingly Hispanic, by the way, in McAllen, Texas. Sick and tired of them.
Oh, by the way, if you are one of these pathetic, thirsty losers who is impressed that there's a Hispanic border guards, first of all, you're a gullible fucking moron. You think it was any mistake that they had a Hispanic woman in front of the caged human beings
that were all male?
That were all male, also, precisely, that Mike Pence walked by. And even so, I'm sorry. If you were a human being, you would still... I even remember as a teenager in the 90s when photos of all men gated in cages in the Balkans were used in the United States as a trigger for what was also a profoundly misguided humanitarian intervention policies. But you know what? It was on a higher moral plane that you shouldn't do that to any human being. If that means something to you, or you can't... well, I guess you're part of the Nancy Pelosi or the Democratic Twitter account, because you can't distinguish between an individual identity and a structural act. So, Kellyanne Conway's a fucking joke. We know what she is. All of these people.
We have an update from Ilhan, though.
All right, let's do this. Hashtag stand with Ilhan always. Bravest person in America.
I am not. What I'm scared for is the safety for people who share my identities. When you have a president who clearly thinks someone like me should go back, right. The message that he's sending is not for me, is to every single person who shares an identity with me. And he's telling them, you guys are going to be all right. He's telling them that this is not their country. And what we tell them is that this is. And they are welcome here Because what I said on my election night was
because
we have said this president is racist. We have condemned his racist remarks. I believe he is fascist because today, even Lindsey Graham defended his comments by saying that if I was wearing a MAGA hat, if there was a Somali person wearing a MAGA hat, they would not be deported. But because I criticized the president, I should be deported. I want to remind people that this is what this president and his supporters have turned our country, that is supposed to be a country where we allow democratic debate and dissent to take place. And so this is not about me, this is about us fighting for what this country truly should be and what it deserves to be.
More for America there than anything that Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump or any of these other scumbags, barbarous, fascist fucking morons have ever done. And you're with her or you're not. So it's time for, I mean, look, people like Pelosi can't get right, but it's time for them to do the bare minimum.
Yeah, I'll just read the definition of fascism as supplied by Robert Paxton in The Anatomy of Fascism. Fascism may be defined as a form of political behavior marked by obsessive preoccupation with community decline, humiliation, or victimhood, and by compensatory cults of unity, energy, and purity, in which a mass-based party of committed nationalist militants working in uneasy but effective collaboration with traditional elites abandons democratic liberties and pursues redemptive violence and without ethical or legal restraints, goals of internal cleansing and external expansion. Trump's a fascist.
What? Trump's absolutely. Let's all right, let's do one more gross thing and then we'll go to the opposite end. Jeffrey Epstein was denied bail today, which is obviously the correct decision. This is somebody who should have already been put away to just protect human beings a long time ago. He's a child rapist and a human trafficker. So it's innately important. Now, hugely important. Now, I am curious, though. I want to know what comes out of this that's bigger than him. I mean, this is somebody that there's been accusations against Dershowitz, which he denies, but an accusation. Then there's just the broader climate of, hey, this is a human trafficker, pedophile. And Steve Pinker was on his plane. And Bill Clinton was on his plane.
Steve Pinker, doing a favor for Alan Dershowitz, helped part of the legal defense of Epstein.
Indeed.
I said he doesn't know much about him, and perhaps that's true, but it's weird to have... This is just the thing, right? This is what we're talking about, the milieu. Yeah, I'll just help him out. I'll write something. I'm a linguist. I got my buddy Alan Dershowitz here. We all, fly to Harvard events.
We all fly to the Caribbean together. We all go, we all get, and maybe even more to the point, we get funding for our centers at Harvard from the likes of Jeffrey Epstein. So, and obviously he had a relationship, with Donald Trump. This is just kind of, look, it's disgusting and disturbing because just of seeing Epstein. But this is just, it's just a Vic Berger. It's one of those moments. Trump is a fucking weirdo. He looks weird even just kind of partying. I don't even know what he's doing, but.
Now, I should probably point out that all those women appear at least to be of age in that video, so we don't want to imply anything.
Yeah, no, it's just, that's Donald Trump with the guy that he says, I don't like that guy. Never liked that guy.
Have you girls heard of 2 Corinthians?
I was reading that. Jesus Christ, these people are fucking freaks. In the Sudan, there has been an agreement that has tentatively been announced between some members of the opposition movement and the Military Transitional Council. Now, this is really, it might be a step forward. Certainly the African Union envoy is saying that. However, and I believe actually one of the people speaking here from the Military Transition Council is the head of the Rapid Response Unit, Rapid Forces. This is the renamed Janjaweed militia, which was the militia that was responsible for the crimes against humanity in Darfur. The Sudanese government, when it was run by Omar al-Bashir, and this is common practice in the Balkans and Latin America, governments will, when they want to commit atrocities and want some line of plausible deniability, even if it's being directed by the government or the military, they'll employ militias and other groups to sort of subcontract it. You see this in U.S.-backed mass killings in Indonesia as another example. So this agreement does not include all members of the opposition, and it doesn't necessarily have any sort of serious economic plan, which is actually what set off this latest round of demonstrations. They were about austerity. Sudan has a powerful labor movement, even after all these years of repression. Let's play a brief report from it on Al Jazeera.
The agreement stipulates that each side will have 5 representatives in the Sovereign Council, with an 11th member to be agreed on by both sides.
It is with pleasure on this morning to bring the good news to the Sudanese people that we have signed the political document between the Transitional Military Council and the Freedom and Change Alliance. It is a historic moment in the history of the Sudanese people and their journey of struggle. It's a new era of partnership between the brave armed forces and our partners in the Freedom and Change Alliance and the Sudanese people. This document is the fruit of the efforts of the people and us as well. We honour the fallen martyrs, the bereaved mothers and the youth, the fuel of this revolution.
The revolution started in December with anti-government protests and turned into a pro-democracy sit-in at the army headquarters in April. That came to an end when the military raided it in early June, killing at least 100 protesters. The agreement signed on Wednesday still lacks many details, which the two sides are continuing to discuss.
So General Mohammed Hamdan, who, and I'm quoting now from the NPR, who was a signatory for the military at this power-sharing deal, the New York Times has reported that protest leaders were uncomfortable with the prominence of General Hamdan and his rapid support forces, which has emerged as the dominant group in a Byzantine security apparatus. They are held responsible and were responsible for killing hundreds of demonstrators in the last couple of weeks. So it might be some slight progress, but this is still a very charged and very problematic situation, and we know that you won't have the real sort of serious transition without a dismantling of groups like this and their power. Nate Sweet. Ben Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg are the same person with inverted colors, silver spoon in their mouth from an early age, put on conveyor belt to power, given every single unearned benefit of doubt. They amass cultural signifiers of intelligence without actually showing their actual work. The only difference is that Ben is cut from a defensive, peevish young Republican cloth, while Buttigieg is an aspirational conduit for white, liberal political consultants who want to run for office one day. Both represent the most corrosive aspects of the cult of meritocracy, and at least Beto's got a fuck up trying his best aesthetic to him. I agree with all of that take. There's not a single part of that take I don't agree with. Let's see. Chomsky, by the way, have you tried Sam's latest project, Alpha Female Vitality? Okay. World gone wrong. Can't stand still on a moving train. Right. Let's take one more call, and then we'll go to one more piece of sound. Sorry. I guess this is the typical time to say we definitely cannot get to all calls. I do apologize. You're calling from a 406 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Brennan from the Masonic Temple.
Hey, Brennan. What's up? Nice.
Thanks for checking in.
Thanks for checking in, Brennan. How's our algorithm doing?
Yeah, man, I was going to ask you the same thing, actually. Not so well lately, huh?
No, it's really weird. I thought that Google was employing us directly to disseminate, destroying testosterone.
I know we haven't appeared at Mass the last couple times.
Yeah.
We're working on it, we're working on it.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed.
I actually did have a somewhat actual point to make and question to ask you today. So nervous, actually.
Oh, no worries.
But yeah, I'm from Montana, Lula Libre.
Lula
you don't
Libre.
hear that much out here, but thank you.
I love Montana.
2 quick points, but I guess I'll get to the big main question I had for you guys today, especially I wanted to hear from both you and Matt. I was basically a liberal normie before the 2016 election. I wrote in Bernie Sanders. I basically had zero intellectual curiosity until Trump won. And now my struggle has been learning all the fundamentals that I sort of shied away from before. I hadn't even taken so much as a civics class in high school. I'm a high school dropout. I do have my GED and stuff, but you don't go over detailed government classes like that in your GED courses, at least where I am.
I don't think you go over that in a lot of high school classes, man.
Yeah, I don't know if you missed out in high school.
I don't think you missed that much. Yeah.
Fair enough. But I was just curious if you guys had any suggestions. I'm leaning more towards communist myself, personally, but I would just broadly say I'm a leftist because of my, like I said, lack of knowledge of the fundamentals. How do you guys even begin, especially me getting a late start, to learn all the old fundamentals like Marx and Lenin and Stalin and stuff while learning?
I would probably skip Stalin.
While keeping up with current events.
I would probably skip Stalin.
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, man, I would assume if you're watching shows like this, you're way more mugged up than you think, and this is not like secret esoteric stuff that you learn at the Messianic Temple. You're just to learn, you engage. If you want to get more specific, I always recommend David Harvey's podcasts on Capital. It can get a little dense, but he's like a super gifted teacher, and he really does a great introduction to Marx and Capital, and that's a fun podcast series. I think actually, honestly, and maybe you've already heard of him, but Richard Wolff does an incredible job. His podcasts are super accessible, and in all of them, you're learning not only key Marxist concepts, but even the history of the Soviet Union and China, and he's a critic. I mean, he's not giving you some airbrushed version of history. So as far as that more stuff goes, I would do that, and I would also, I always plug. The other people that would, in terms of real historical awareness, I would always just plug to just look up essays by, say, Bill Fletcher Jr. and Adolph Reed. I mean, those are two people you always just learn a hell of a lot from. Yeah, and I would just say, I mean, you've basically come to the right place for this stuff, and I'm not just talking about this show, but I mean, there's a lot of left YouTube channels. I've been putting up. I have a thread going. Maybe I should pin it about different channels that have been doing stuff on YouTube and a lot of podcasts. I mean, I think the more important thing is, rather than thinking you're ever going to get to approach where it's like, okay, I know all the fundamentals, I know everything. It's mainly just you need to maintain a sense of curiosity and humility about this stuff. Because, I mean, as somebody who now I have 10,000 Twitter followers, as opposed to when I started here, I had 500. And that doesn't mean I've become that much more intelligent, for instance, like that, or informed. And nobody is really in this space. You just kind of have to diversify your sources. Majority Report's a good place to find. I mean, the reason I found Majority Report is because of how many different types of authors you can expose yourself to here. Nobody does as many in-depth dives as this show does every week. So I think just don't feel too concerned about it, or too much anxiety. Yeah, over and all of that stuff is it's all in dispute anyways. But it's not. There's no secret code that you're not getting access to, and definitely don't confuse somebody speaking fluently with mastery of the subject matter. And this stuff is meant to help you interface with other people too, not to sort of just make your brain the best communist brain ever, right? Right. You're looking for stuff that's actually useful in the current struggle we're undergoing right now. So I think as long as you can bear that in mind, just read widely and listen widely. Read and listen widely.
Okay, can I just get a quick, I have on my wish list audiobook. Can maybe one of you guys help me pick one out from my list here? Oh, yeah. The Socialist Manifesto. I have Why Marx Was Right. I have State and Revolution and Democracy at Work. And I also want to read Ben Burgis's new book and Ryan Grimm's newest book, too.
I honestly, I have listened to The Socialist Manifesto by Bhaskar Sankara. That's a great one to start with, actually.
All of those books are great, but I think especially for the stuff you're interested in, what you're talking about specifically, I would grab Socialist Manifesto. And
sweet, because I'm a DSA member anyway, so that's like
grab
awesome.
Socialist Manifesto and definitely, and by the way, read a bunch of articles in the Jacobin. I mean, and so on. Hey, I appreciate the call.
So thank you guys so much for taking my call again. Lula Libre.
Lula Libre, thank you so much.
Shout out Montana.
Shout out Montana. A great call. Sorry, folks. We're gonna. That's gonna be it. But I do want to play. Just 1 second. I want to play this. This is really, really important. What's happening at the border are concentration camps. It can be solved and dealt with by demilitarizing the process. That absolutely needs to happen now. There can be a border, there can be a nation state, and all of this. Nobody's talking about ending that tomorrow or anytime soon. We're saying people have a right to apply for asylum. People who have been living and working in the United States need to be immediately granted legal status. And that the process of kidnapping children, separating families, people dying and being tortured, and concentration camps morally unacceptable. And this is powerful. I mean, this is a Holocaust survivor, Bernard Marx, confronting the ICE director, Thomas Homan, the former ICE director, Thomas Homan, because, of course, for people who actually care about history and humanity, never again literally means never again.
I was hauled up by the Nazis. And for no other reason, I was picked up and separated from my family, who was exterminated in Auschwitz. And I am a survivor of Auschwitz and Dachau. I spent 5.5 years in concentration camp. I spent 5.5 years in concentration camp for one season and one reason only. Because we picked on people. And you as the sheriff, who we elected as sheriff of this county. We did not elect you as sheriff of Washington, D.C. It's about time you serve the people here. And when this gentleman stands up there and he says he doesn't go after any people, he should read today's beat. Because in today's beat, the Supreme Court Justice of State of California objected to ICE coming in and taking people away from the courts. Don't tell me that this is a lie. You stand up here, Mr. Jones, don't forget, history is not on your side.
I don't know who the other person he's referring to is. I thought it was the former director of ICE. Apologize about the details on that, but the bottom line is that
Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones.
And Holman was there as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So not that you need this validation to be able to do basic deductive reasoning yourself. But to the extent we hear of people who have survived the Holocaust or the Japanese internment, they are telling you that this is absolutely unacceptable. Absolutely a crime against humanity. And it is. And anybody, I mean, I'm quite clear that most people watching this understand that it is wrong and it is unacceptable. But anybody that would equivocate on it or soft sell it or issue a tweet on it, but then vote for a funding package that does nothing to ameliorate the conditions, they're part of it. And it needs to end completely. period. And that is, again, it is a simple process of conforming with national and international law and demilitarizing a process that can still be conducted in a legal, humane fashion. Period. Rude Gus, on the Periscope after the exchange of ideas with Marianne, Dave called Vox and HuffPo Pox and HuffPoop. I thought you guys said Dave was bad at comedy.
I thought Dave was against ad hominems.
Yeah. That's very disturbing. I thought Dave was interested in dealing with people's ideas, not calling names. Jesus Christ. Let's see. All right, I get IMs like this. Important to note that Cornel West backed Jill Stein after Bernie lost 2016. No, it's not. Nope. It's not important to me.
Yeah, who cares?
Don't be a pedant. Don't and
that's the thing is he does work. He's done way more work than you do, frankly. And I don't know who you are, but definitely he's done more work for progress than you have. So you know what? You get a couple.
Yeah, I disagree with him on that, but I'm sorry. And it goes for people on the other side too. It's like, I'm like Cornel West. No, you're not. Right? But like this is one of the by far most important public intellectuals we have, with an incredible clear articulation of values that he's willing to take everywhere. And you know what? If he's fucking fed up, I disagree with him at the time. I literally publicly disagreed with the man at the time. What is it? I mean, this.
But it's not something to bring up every time the man comes up. That's lunacy.
It's a lunacy. It's nonsense. He's putting in the work right now. So I did that because I always get somebody who says that, and that's it. No more of that. Final IM of the day. I don't know if anybody's going to have an answer to this, but it's kind of interesting. Emperor Tiger Star. The real question the left must answer, is it Iron Maiden or Metallica? I have no answer.
I like Iron Maiden.
And leave it to the Metalhead Caucus.
All right. It's Iron Maiden. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted in and out